Welcome to the Undergraduate Open Day for 2026 for history. It's really brilliant to have you all here, and we hope that we can answer some of your questions. My name's Samantha Williams. I am the Academic Director for History at Professional and Continuing Education. I'm also the course director for the MST in History if at some point you want to stay with us and progress from undergraduate to postgraduate. And I'm delighted to say that we also have one of our students who's going to be the student rep today, Richard Lister. And we'll come to you in a moment, Richard, when I've just gone through the course outline a little bit. Thanks so much for coming and making the time to come.
Excellent.
I'm going to talk for, I don't know, about 10 minutes, not very long. And then most of the session is going to be Q&A. So if you want to put your questions in the Q&A, we'll hope to get through all of those in after 10 minutes in that section, in the bulk of the time that we've got together. Okay, so let me just move that on. So the course represented today is the undergraduate certificate in history, which is a level 4 qualification, which is the same as the first year of an undergraduate degree in history. So professional and continuing education is the University of Cambridge's largest and longest standing provider of part-time education. For 150 years, we've offered flexible, accessible, high-quality education to learners from all walks of life and at every stage of adult life and their careers. We believe that as life continues, so does learning. We operate independently from the Cambridge College and school system. This unique position gives us access to Cambridge's academic knowledge and resources, while allowing us freedom to uphold our core values of accessibility, sharing world-class education with our community of learners across the world. This vibrant global community of thousands of learners gather online and in person to learn from the best to achieve their lifelong learning goals. Whether they are studying purely for personal growth and enrichment, returning to study, retraining after a long career break, or pursuing professional qualifications to advance their career, we are here for them. Now, this is the course summary. We teach over 3 terms. Cambridge has a termly structure for undergraduates of all levels and at professional and continuing education, as well as for undergrads in the colleges. So this is the course summary, and you'll take 1 unit per term. Most of the teaching is on a Saturday afternoon, and it's all online. So the first course is Reformation, Revolution and Regicide in Britain, 1603 to 1714. So this is the British unit that we offer, because we offer a British one, a European one and a world one. So the kinds of material you're going to cover for that first unit is King James VI of Scotland and James I of England, who comes to the throne in 1603. And the course covers tensions between the king and parliament and Charles I dissolving parliament and ruling alone, dissolving parliament and ruling alone because of the tensions between the king and parliament. We then cover the Civil War and the Revolution in the 1640s, then the downfall of the Stuart monarchy and the execution of Charles I. The interregnum follows with the Puritan period of republicanism, and then the restoration of Charles II in 1660. What we sort of call, in inverted commas, the Glorious Revolution of 1688, and then right through to the end of the rule of Queen Anne in 1714. So the second unit after Christmas in the Lent term is Fascism in Europe between 1918 and 1945. And in this, you'll focus on discussing the characteristics common to the most overtly fascist or national socialist movements in Europe in that period. So you'll start by thinking about the consequences of the First World War. There's then quite a focus on Italian fascism the sort of birthplace of fascism in that period, followed by Hitler and his National Socialism. But you'll also think about fascist movements in other European countries. So that will cover Austria, Hungary, Romania, Spain, and Britain. There's also some consideration of everyday life under fascism, the role of propaganda, and then the Holocaust and the Second World War. And then finally, in the Easter term, you'll move to the World History unit, Making of America and the Native Americans. And this unit covers conflict, diplomacy, and government relations and the state of Native Americans from first contact through to the present day in the United States of America and the Americas, and then United States of America. And it obviously it's difficult to do everything, so there are sort of key moments and key conflicts that are covered. So Measure Com's Rebellion, the 7 Years' War, and the American Civil War, the move of Native Americans to reservations, their role in the Second World War, and then you'll finish by looking at contemporary art and literature. Okay, so I was asked when we were putting these slides together to say who our target audience is, and actually it's just anyone interested in history. It's open access to this course. You just have to be interested in history. You just have to have some interest in those 3 units and thinking about different approaches that you might like to take to thinking about the study of history. So there are no entry requirements. All we would like is some enthusiasm and commitment to undertaking the course. As I said at the beginning, most of the teaching is on Saturday afternoons UK time. I think there's one Sunday afternoon in Lent term, but nearly all the others are Saturday afternoons. It's something like 1 till 3 or 4 in the afternoon, I think, isn't it, Richard? Yeah, you're nodding. So these are live lectures, and then the lecturers also use breakout rooms, discussion of the themes that lecture's been on, the discussion of some of the primary sources, thinking about your essays and your essay plans and which ones you might like to answer on. Oh, and there's some study skills training as well that one of our tutors offers. So in the breakout rooms, you've got plenty of opportunity to meet other people, to discuss what you're interested with, do some peer-to-peer learning. And in terms of assessment, we've got quite a diversity of different approaches to thinking about how you might learn and to teach you the real skills that historians then employ, professional historians. So there are 4 original document evaluations. These are up to 1,300 words each. You'll be given a selection of original sources from the time, and then you're to comment on what they're telling you, how historians use them, what's the context of why those documents might have been made. And then in term, so you'll do 2 of those in Michaelmas and then 1 in Lent and 1 in Easter. Then the second assessment is in the Lent term will be an article comparison. So that's slightly longer, 2,500 words. And there are 2 articles on fascism for you to compare. And this is to get you to, so you've done a little bit of thinking about how historians use primary sources by then. This will then take you up the next step, which is how do historians use those sources to come up with their own work that they publish. And most historians publish articles as well as monographs, as well as books. So it's to get you to think about how historians not only use the material that they use, but how they might then disagree. So what's the debate? We call this historiography. This is how history moves on over time. Why do they disagree? What do they look at? Do they disagree just because they're looking at different sources, or are they looking at exactly the same sources, but they just really disagree on what they think they might be telling you? And then this builds up to the essay. So in Easter term, you'll take another document evaluation, but then you'll write an essay. So this is with the same length, 2,500 words. This is a lot more the sort of traditional teaching of history at school and at university, writing lots and lots of essays. So you can see and you get a lot of choice of the number of essays to choose from. So you can see by the time you've got to the essay, you've done quite a lot of this source appreciation. You've thought about how historians debate by looking at the articles, and then you'll read a lot more. You'll read, I know, 10 things maybe, and you'll answer the question with regard to how the historians have debated and argued and put forward their approaches. So by then, you should be a really good historian. You've had a good go at all the different approaches that we employ. So I'm just going to ask our student if he would like to introduce himself.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Richard. Yeah, so a little bit about me for context. My background, both study and work, is entirely in science and technology. So the reason I was interested in taking this course is sort of twofold. The first is that I wanted to do something that would be an intellectual diversion from my background and from my day-to-day work life, something completely different that had nothing to do with science and technology. Um, but also I'm looking for something that is intellectually rigorous. Once you reach a certain point of life, it can be a good idea to continue to exercise the old grey matter. And so I'm looking for something that really will do that. And obviously, it's something that I'm extremely interested in. I have absolutely no training in the humanities at all. I think one of the things that gave me slight pause when starting the course, one of the things that I was um, probably most nervous about is I haven't written an essay since 1983 prior to this course, so it's been a few years. And I wasn't really sure whether that was something that I still had the muscle memory for, how hard it would be to get up to speed on that. And it's been, it actually all came flooding back. So it's been a pleasurable experience to do that, and I've started to really enjoy doing it. But the key to me was doing something that had intellectual rigor and really differed from things I've done in the past. And I would say that, at least from my point of view, this course has absolutely fulfilled that role. I think this course is ideal for someone who is either new to university level study, or is, as in my case, has worked at the university and postgraduate level before, but in a field so radically different that the sort of set of skills you need to acquire are really radically different.
And how have you found the experience, Richard? How's it been? You've been on the course for a term and a half now, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've just finished Lent term seminars. So I still have one essay to write for the Lent term, and then I'm looking forward to the Easter term coming up. So two full terms of teaching. It's been honestly thoroughly enjoyable. It's exceeded almost all of my expectations for the course. The actual seminars themselves, which take place on Saturdays, I look forward to them every week. Sort of the highlight of my week doing it. The interaction with the tutors has been excellent. I would say that you should not have any concern that the tutors are of a high quality. These are Cambridge professors who are working at the very highest levels in their field. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're very highly skilled at teaching. So this is a full-on Cambridge University experience. This isn't some sort of second-class citizen. And the tutors have been wonderful to work with. Um, they have a high level of teaching skills, but also they are extremely adaptive to the unique challenges of continuing education. So this is people from many different backgrounds, people from different countries around the world, people in different time zones, and obviously there are often some challenges associated with that. We have one chap who's in Brisbane. And it's getting quite late at night by the time he's joining the course. So kudos to him for doing that.
It's commitment, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So apologies, by the way, if you can hear my dogs barking in the background. They're having fun today as well. Um, But the tutors are very highly adaptable and do an excellent job of coping with the sort of different needs of the different students, and adapting and working with each student as is necessary to help each student with the various challenges that they're facing, associated with the course. That's been an excellent experience. The second sort of component to the course is it is important to understand that you are expected to do work outside of the individual sessions, which happen on a Saturday. There is reading to be done. And I spend my week doing the reading. I would say, I think the question of time management is an interesting one. There is a huge amount of flexibility built into the course. So it is very easy to fit it around your life. But you have to be prepared to make a reasonable time commitment in terms of the number of hours you can devote each week to doing your reading and doing your study. Um, I think one of the important skills that I have acquired as part of this, or come to appreciate, is not reading everything. Much like Dr. Johnson, it's not necessary to read the entire book. One of the skills of taking a course like this is being able to assess material very quickly, identify the parts of that material you need, whether it's identifying academic papers that are useful to you, or the parts of those papers that are useful, identifying specific chapters of books, not reading cover to cover, but being able to dip in and out of multiple sources, quickly get the information you need, compare and contrast that information, and then sort of build up a viewpoint on that basis. So that's been challenging, but also a lot of fun to come to terms with that.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we wanted to bring to your attention the fact there's an early enrolment benefit this year for these courses, and you can save £150 by enrolling on a PACE undergraduate course before the 30th of May 2026, and this will be issued as a refund after successful enrolment. And this can be combined with other eligible concessions and bursaries. And there's a section on the website about bursaries if you any of you are interested in going and looking up some of those. Early enrollers will receive a range of benefits, and these include early access to the undergraduate resource area on our virtual learning environment, sort of Moodle page that has study resources and subject introductions. There'll be opportunities to connect with peers and other learners through engagement activities. There'll be academic director talks and selected bite-sized lectures. You'll also get early access to University of Cambridge online library resources and a library guide, and free short online courses that partner with other organisations. And you've got there the deadline of the 30th of May if you're interested in enrolling early. So in terms of next steps, if you've got any further questions after this session and our Q&A, you can contact the enquiries team about any questions about applications, and my email address is on there as well. And then our final slide. Thanks very much for listening to us. And now we're going to take the Q&A. So if you've got Q&A questions, please put them in the Q&A chat. That also had other places to find more information out. Just to remind you, the application deadline is the 2nd of September. That's the final deadline, and the early enrolment one of the 30th of May. Okay. So I'll have a look now at our Q&A. Okay. So somebody has asked, are reading lists and texts made available? Actually, you've just been mentioning, haven't you, Richard, just how much reading you could undertake if you read everything that's on the list. So there are lists on the course guide, aren't there, that you have access to? Are there other
Yes.
ones on VLE? Are there additional readings
Uh,
listed, or mainly
so
the course
the
guide?
Yeah, there aren't really set readings as such. Aside from, so for example, when you do a primary source analysis, obviously you're going to read
Yeah.
that primary source. But other than that, there are some very extensive reading lists in the course guide. And like I say, you couldn't possibly read everything that's in there, every part of everything that's in there. So it's
Mm,
important to be able to sample the readings. Most of the sources in the reading lists are books. So one skill that you will develop is using those as a sort of starting point. And then one thing I've learned about history that distinguishes it from science very much is history spends a lot of time in the footnotes. So citations and discussions happen in very extensive footnotes, and it is worth spending some time there. And that is kind of your launching point to trying to identify the historiography and identify, for example, journal articles and so on that you might be interested in reading. And you have full access to the Cambridge University Library online, and you can access pretty much any journal article you would need through the university
yeah,
online. And also a pretty significant chunk of book material you might be interested in as
that's right.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And every year I'm amazed how much is available electronically, more and more and more and more. And it's rare that I have to go to a library anymore.
absolutely.
And actually, the university library have this thing called scan and deliver service. So if it is a chapter in an edited volume that they only have in paper, you can ask for them to do your scan, and within a few days they've usually sent it. So you really don't have to leave your kitchen table. It's just, it's really amazing. Yeah. So there'll be extensive reading lists provided. Almost all of it will be available electronically because we ask tutors to try and choose as much as they possibly can that's electronically available. Often you find if somebody, say you can't get hold of somebody's monograph, they've written several articles before they wrote the monograph. So there's always somewhere you can usually get the material fairly easily. So that's in terms of our reading lists and texts. So we've had a question about access to facilities if one visited Cambridge. I'm not entirely sure about that because all of this is done online. I think because you've got the e-resources, you can probably go and sit in. Have you tried to sit in the university library, Richard?
Ye-
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually came over. So actually, for context, I'm actually, despite my accent, in the United States. So, but I was over in Cambridge in September for the welcome event for PACE, and went and spent a few days in the university library. And I don't know if it's still the case, but the history department library, the Seeley Library, had
Mm,
been temporarily relocated to the university library, which was quite convenient. But you don't have college membership, but you are a full member of the university. You get a university ID card, and if
yeah.
you are in or around Cambridge, you can go and use the library facilities. You can go and study in the library. You can go and borrow books, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the CD is going to be there a little while they fix the history faculty. So yeah,
Okay,
so it's all in the West Room, isn't it? It's at the back of
it
the
is. Yeah,
university.
yeah. So it's very convenient.
And what's really good about the Seeley is they have multiple copies of books too. So the university library only has one copy of any book, usually. Sometimes it has two, but it has the right to take one of everything. But the Seeley, if they're core texts, will have five or six of any given book. Yep. Apart from the students write on them quite a lot, I've noticed there's quite a lot of marginalia in those copies.
It
So
wasn't
in
me, I
terms of
promise.
sports centre, there should be access to that as well. If you've got the CAM card, there should be access to most things, shouldn't there? Apart from
Yeah.
colleges. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So in terms of how do you get, so someone else has said how do you get access to books outside of Cambridge? I think we've covered that now because so many of them will be ebooks. So there's a variety of ways of reading ebooks, depending on the platform that's made them available. Um, so sometimes the really good ones, well, if they're open access, you can just download the whole book. And that academia is increasingly going that way. that things are open access. Uh, Sometimes you can download particular chapters. There might be a limit on how many chapters you can download, but you're probably not going to be reading the whole book anyway. There's usually a way of reading a whole book online, but not being able to download it if there are restrictions on the download amount. So you can usually always read all of the book online if that's, and what's really good about those kinds of ways of accessing books is if you're looking for something in particular, you can search inside the book in a way that you can't do with a real book. You'd have to just plow through the index and hope for the best. So that you can you can flick through really quickly if necessary. Um, then in terms of library access, somebody's asked about library access. That would just be the Seeley and the History Library and the University Library, but not college libraries. You would have to request permission to, and undergraduates have to do that at Cambridge too. They're not allowed to use each other's libraries at colleges. If they hold a copy, that they're the only people that hold a copy, you can ask the librarian for access. Okay, so somebody else has said you welcomed a welcome meeting to Pace in September. Did you go to one, Richard, or were you in the States when there was the welcome?
No, I came over for
Okay,
that. So that's at Mattingly Hall, or at least it was
yeah,
in 2025. And it's just kind of a welcome event. So there are tables set up, and the academics from each of the PACE courses are available to go and have a chat with them, which was very interesting and useful.
did you get a cup of tea and a sticky bun or something?
I
Was there?
did,
Yeah.
yes. There was a nice lunch provided as well, a nice buffet lunch.
And you got to meet some of your peers as well, the people who are going to be coming on your course.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
a big crowded event. There's lots of people from different courses, and it was actually very interesting to talk to people on other courses as well, which was nice.
Yeah.
Um, I will say that we do so as part of the VLE, the sort of online learning experience. There are chat rooms, and we spend a decent amount of time. The people on the course, we spend a decent amount of time chatting with each other,
Mm.
engaging in some lively discussions, and a few people on the course have arranged sort of meetups, either to go out for a cup of tea or something, or to go and visit a site of historical interest. So I went with a fellow student to visit the banqueting hall in London. Because
Right.
we'd been studying the ceiling by Rubens, and so they opened it up, and we went and had a look, which was very
Oh, how
nice. And
great. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Your
nice
own little
little field
field trip.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Another course question about the course is, this is one for you, Richard. What preconceptions did you have about the course before you applied?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure I had preconceptions as such. I had some hopes, which what I was looking for. Like I say, I was looking for something that was intellectually rigorous. If I'm going to take a course like this, I want it to be,
Mm.
at sort of one of the best places to do it. Obviously, like Cambridge, and like I say, it's lived up to my expectations. The quality of the teaching has been exceptional, and I think. I've always read a lot of history as a keen amateur, but what I was interested in was learning how to be a historian, how to do history,
Yeah,
and things like how to engage with primary sources, how to think about historiography, and how to develop a feel for what other historians have said and thought about a specific period or a specific subject. And I was very interested in both in the subject matter of the three terms, but also in comparing and contrasting the historical approach to each of these, because these are three very different periods to look at. If you're looking at the early modern period, obviously there's enormous forests of trees have been felled to write about the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution and so on. So there's a great deal of material there, but there are a lot of challenges, especially if you're not used to the field, like as in my case. There are challenges reading 17th century documents.
yeah,
The language is strange and unfamiliar. the assumptions are strange and unfamiliar, the modes of thought, and it takes you a while to sort of come to terms with that. So, that's sort of one kind of primary source. If you're then looking at the fascism module, that's 20th century sources, which are very different again. Again, you can use newsreels and radio and diplomatic messages and so on, and newspapers, and so there's a lot of very different style of primary sources available to you. And then again, dealing with Native American history, especially trying to come to terms with the Native American viewpoint, this is a non-literate culture. So you do not have written primary sources. The only primary sources that exist are from the US government point of view. So you're getting a very one-sided picture. So how on earth do you approach studying that subject? How on earth do you approach studying these people and their lives and what they were thinking about the events that were occurring? And so um, I think the focus of the course on these subjects has been something that I was hoping for, and something that I've been pleasantly surprised to find is strong.
Yeah, great. We've got another question, which was that we worried about anything like imposter syndrome.
Yes. Well, I personally am highly prone to imposter syndrome. And so I've spent a lot of time over the course of my life thinking about how to deal with imposter syndrome. So for anybody who is facing that, I would say this course is designed for anybody and everybody. So do not be afraid to jump in both feet first and have a go, because there is a huge amount of flexibility. The tutors are very understanding of people's different backgrounds and will work with you on whatever you need to be able to succeed at this course, and get everything you want from it. You mentioned the study skills tutor. There is a tutor who is an expert on study skills and communicating study skills, who joins some of our sessions to give specific tips, how to work with primary sources, how to work with reading lists, how to do literature searches, how to write essays. And so that's been very useful. And we did also get access to a huge amount of study skills material online, both through the university library, and then we also had access to some Wolfson College material as well, which I found very useful, sort of in preparation for the course. A couple of weeks before the course started, I dug through a lot of that material, which I found very useful indeed.
Yeah.
So I would say, even if this is something that is very far outside of your comfort zone, it is designed to help you, and structured to help you. So do not feel like an imposter.
Say that to everyone at Cambridge. Do not feel like an imposter. And I'm glad that you said about it being unfamiliar, because even the recent past should feel, if you're a good historian, it should all feel unfamiliar. Not
Right.
very far back at all, really. Even the Victorian period should feel to some extent unfamiliar. Otherwise, you're being a little bit anachronistic, taking back your
Absolutely.
views on how we see it now. Yeah, yeah. Um, Okay, so somebody has said, what have we got here? We've got, given that we don't do exams, can we progress further in history at Cambridge if successful? So anyone who would want to do an undergraduate course at Cambridge would still have to go through the same application process as students, sixth formers who are applying to Cambridge for an undergraduate degree. It's highly competitive, but doing very well on this course, we have had students who've then been able to use this as a sort of way to apply to Cambridge or Oxford. We had somebody who got an offer at Oxford and at Warwick, I think, and somewhere in London. I think she might have had an existing degree, but not in history. But then she did well on this course, so she got lots of offers to go on and study somewhere else. So it might be possible to use it in that way, given it's slightly higher than an A level anyway. Okay, what else have we got here? We've got another one for you, Richard. Did you work more closely with your cohort and academics than you expected to?
Uh, yes, I think so. like I say, the academics are very highly available for assistance, both. Um, well, actually, let me back up slightly. I'll talk a little bit about the sessions that we have every Saturday. Um, we do a couple of things which so a component of those sessions is sort of delivering a lecture. But we also do very frequent breakout rooms where we will study a particular uh, field, we'll study a particular subject, and then go into a breakout room of two or three people and engage in discussion with the other students. Um, Sometimes with guided questions that we should have tried to approach an answer to, or sometimes just a generalized discussion. So you do build up quite a good relationship with your fellow students on the course through doing that every week. And then also the floor is always open in these sessions to sort of raise your hand and ask a question, or maybe sometimes engage in an argument about an interpretation, which is always fun. And so it's very loosely structured, and there is a lot of opportunity for interaction there, both with your tutor and with fellow students. And like I say, the online chats that we engage in as students are pretty lively as well. And tutors are always available if you'd like to discuss specific aspects of the course. Yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks. I've also had a question about the average class size. I think you've got about 12 or 13 on your cohort at
Yeah,
the
it sounds
moment.
about
Is
right.
that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say that's about average. We have between sort of 12 and 20 on this course.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, oh, I don't know about this one. Do you have any support for using the VLE for those who struggle with digital platforms? I think there's quite a lot of e-help, isn't there, within the VLE? Have you had
There
to use
is,
any of
there
that?
is.
Yeah.
I'm probably not the best person to ask because I'm from a technical background, so I can normally find my way around digital platforms pretty easily.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I will say uh, we have people from a wide range of backgrounds on the course that I'm taking right now, and there are we have a couple of retired people on the course who are maybe not as familiar with some of the technology
Mm.
as the young whippersnappers are these days, and they've received all of the support and help that they need. The pace sort of support in general is excellent. So there is always someone available, but either by email or by chat to help you solve technical issues, to help you get access to things that you may be struggling to get into, and so on. So I would say there's no particular concerns there.
Great. And have you found uploading your assignments has all gone smoothly and using
Yeah,
Turnitin? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no problem
And then
at all.
accessing your mark and the feedback. That's
Yeah,
all been,
that's
fine.
all very straightforward. Yeah, the first time you upload, I think the first essay I uploaded, it declared that something like over a third of my essay was plagiarized. But
It's
I
not how
soon
Turnitin
realized,
works, so I bet. So
yeah,
yes.
it actually just takes every time you quote a paper or every time you cite with the title, in your bibliography, regards the whole bibliography as plagiarism because it's just matching
That's
up
right.
titles and quotations and things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's fine.
I think Turnitin is really useful for showing you if you're too close to somebody's words. It's a really good tool to use
Hmm.
to put your assignments through before you upload the final copy. But you're right, the matching, whether it's green, orange, or red, bears little relation to whether you've actually plagiarized, because it will pick up all titles, all
Exactly.
footnotes, all quotes where you're doing it properly. Yeah, you can end up with quite a high match, which is a bit disconcerting to start with. Okay. Have we anything else? So one student's actually asked about in terms of native peoples, or do we look at Canada too? I think it's just North America, isn't it? The USA. You've not got that. Oh, you've just finished that
Uh,
course. So yeah, you can
yes,
answer.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it is North America, so including there is some touching on Mexico and
Ah,
the Spanish territories in the 17th and 18th century in the Southwest. But North America does also include Canada.
it does
And
include.
um, I'm actually currently writing an essay on the Seven Years' War, and really almost the definition of the nature of boundaries, both between England and France, the British colonies,
Mm.
and the French colonies in what would subsequently become Canada, are sort of defined by the Seven Years' War. But also a critical part of this is the nature of these borders not existing from the viewpoint of the native peoples.
Yeah,
And a lot of the drawing of boundaries for what would be considered native land and would later become reservations crosses those sort of European style borders that have been drawn on maps, without regard to the historical lands and the tribal relationships of the native peoples. So it's a very pertinent subject. But yes, the short
yeah.
answer
Oh,
is
that's great. I'm
it
really
does
glad
include
you could
Canada
answer
too.
that one. Yeah, yeah. And then I think we probably have one final question, which is what you're planning to do when you finish this course, Richard.
Well, that's a great question. So yeah, I'd looked at the sort of the course structure at Pace before enrolling in this course, and tentatively been interested in potentially going further. One, if I was enjoying myself, which I am,
Yeah,
so
you sure? Yeah,
yes. And also two, if I'm doing well enough, and if the sort of qualifications lead on to the next level and so on. So yes, I absolutely plan to keep going. One of the nice things about the PACE courses is that they are structured in this very sort of flexible way. So the courses tend to be sort of 1 year at a time until you get to the MST level, which is 2 years, I believe. Um, but so you can sort of chop and change, and if you want to do a course and then maybe come back in a year or two and then do the next course
yeah,
and so on, it's got all of that flexibility built into it. So but yes, I plan to continue.
yeah. Great, brilliant. Um, And then we did have a question actually, which was about progression. And there isn't another history certificate, and there aren't history diplomas, but there are history adjacent ones. So I don't know if that's what you're thinking as well, Richard. You might want to have a completely different subject, but there's art history, there's
Yeah,
medieval studies, there's archaeology. So you could
that's right.
build up your
Um, Yeah, you could sort of go sideways. There's a certificate on medieval England, and then I think that alternates with the early medieval England
that's right. So there's two of
certificate.
those.
Which,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and early medieval, yeah, as you say, you're sort of connecting into archaeology there, and sort of. But there's also, I think there's a diploma on history and philosophy of science, which looks quite interesting. But I'm actually right now looking at the advanced diploma on research methods, because I'm interested in digging deeper on how to approach primary source research and how to do new research, identify potentially new archives that have been underexplored, and how I might go about doing that.
yeah. And there's two advanced diplomas. So you could do the first year, which is learning how to be a researcher. And then you get to write, is it 10 to 12,000 word, I think, dissertation the second year if you want to stay on and
Sounds about right,
do
yeah.
a big dissertation. If you've got a subject you're interested in, you got something you think
I'm
that you're a burning ambition.
a burning ambition. I'm interested in early modern thought in general, but I need to try and identify something to work on specifically.
Early modern thought, did you
Hmm.
say? Yeah. Oh,
Intellectual
political
history,
thought. Would it be political?
po-
Yeah.
political, intellectual, religious, uh, potentially even how religion and opinions on witchcraft might have intersected.
Ah, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I do have a student on the advanced diploma doing something similar to that on the East Anglian witch trials at the moment. So
Oh, very interesting.
yeah. Um, and I think there's quite a lot of, and he's an American in Germany, but there's a lot online. So a lot of the trials are online, or you can use pamphlet literature. So there's lots of ways of doing that from anywhere in the world without, or you could go in an archive and try and actually read it.
Excellent. Well, this is where I'm going to start.
Right, well, I think that brings us to the end of all our questions. I hope everybody's really enjoyed attending this session, and they've learnt the answers to the questions that they've put. I want to thank Richard warmly for your contribution. Thank you very much for coming
Thank
in
you for
and
having me.
and presenting, yeah, such the sheer amount of information you've managed to give us. If anybody needs any further help, the email was on the slides. If you want to reach out there for any further questions. The recording's been will be circulated. We've recorded this session. It'll be circulated in the next few days to those who signed up. And if anybody's got any questions, if they want to get in touch via enquiries@pace.cam.ac.uk. Right. Well, thanks very much then. Thanks for your time. Bye.